Will I move? Okay.
So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar. My name is Ryan, and I'm a marketing manager here at Your Overseas Home. It's great to have so many of you with us today, whether you're watching live or demand. Today, we'll be chatting with Stefana, a founder and managing director at the Property Organizer, and we'll be talking about property buying essentials you should think about when moving to Italy. So before we start, Stefana, I'll just make sure I'm saying it right.
Stefania.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Please, can you introduce yourself and share with our viewers what Property Organizer does?
Yeah, sure. Basically, Property Organizer is not an estate agent, but we are a specialized property finders, property consultancy that we offer several services for our clients. So our core service is property findings, only working for the buyer side, and we search extensively the property market to find property that match their requirements. Also, we offer other services like legal assistance, restoration assistance, after sale. So we literally offer in one place only all the services related to properties when we're talking about buying property in Italy.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. So just to our viewers, we invite you to post any questions you have for Stefania in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be answering your questions after the presentation. We obviously hope to answer as many queries as we can today, but if we don't get round to them, please don't worry. Any unanswered questions will be forwarded to Stefania and her team at the Property Organizer. So enough from me, so we can get cracking with the presentation, if that's okay.
Sure. Ryan, just a quick question. On our trial, I could change my slides. Now it doesn't seem
there you
so
go.
If you want to change it, so if you go back to the previous one, fine. Okay, so you're going to do it. Great. Again, greeting everyone. So we're here today to give you some direction and advice on buying in Italy. But obviously the time is constrained. So today I will give you some ideas, and then, as Ryan said, we will be available to discuss anything further and answer any other questions that you might have. I will try to discuss today key points that were generally asked. So what do I need to know to buy in Italy? What I'm going to cover, next slide, please. I'm going to cover taxes and likely costs. So when you purchase in Italy, what you need to consider, how to budget, what to consider after you bought your home, and also the property that needs to be renovated or sometimes built, what to ask before making the decision to buy this type of property, and the type of checks that might need to be done. In terms of taxes and likely cost, firstly, I would like to say that not everything is mandatory in this list, but I'm here, as I said, to give you an overall idea of the costing related to buying a property in Italy. And as for instance, this first point, the surveyor, is a cost that we would highly recommend it, to invest and not to avoid. However, a surveyor is not an obligatory fee. Who is a surveyor? Very often people might have heard the word geometra. Surveyor is someone who will carry out property checks on your behalf. A surveyor can be a geometra, as I said, can be an architect, can be an engineer. What is important about survey? It's not much about the condition of a property. Very often I hear clients say, "Oh, I can see that property needs to be renovated. It's fine," or "I can see that property is a new build. I'm happy with the condition. I don't want a surveyor." The surveyor's role is to check the land registry and the urban planning compliance of a property. Without that compliance, first, a deed could be made void, but also you could inherit a lot of problems. So the surveyor will have to check the land registry, that the existing layout of the property matches the plans that are registered at the land registry office, but also all the history of of a property under the planning point of view, because for every type of work that a property has been subjected in the years, even 50 years ago, there should be always some kind of authorization or a permit or what we call it, for example, in the UK, a building control registration. So anything that has been done to that property should be kind of registered at the land registry office or the local authority, or if it's a structural work at the region called the office called Genio Civile. So it is important that this role is, that this person is instructed and not to avoid this fee. We highly recommend it. Agency fee. Agency in Italy charge from 3% to 5% on each side, so both on the buyer side and the seller side. So agents in Italy charge a total between 6 and 10% plus the VAT. The Italian VAT is at 22%. So in total, the state agency charge quite a lot of fees. What is important to know that agency in Italy are not do not work only for the buyer or do not work only for the seller, but they should be above parties. Obviously, that doesn't very difficult to maintain this kind of role. But yes, so state agency chargeable side. On my slides, we put 3.5% of property price because here a property organizer we charge only the buyer is a 3.5%. If a property comes from an estate agent, so because when we carry out a property search, we thoroughly search the market. So we work with estate agents, private sellers, developers. We try to ensure that anything that is available on the market that matches the client's criteria is offered to our clients. And in case properties are from estate agencies, we will represent only our buyer, and the estate agents in Italy will represent the seller. So through us, we charge 3.5% of the property price, and within that property price, we also include various services like obtaining fiscal code, opening bank account, all the contract in both Italian and English, etc. Notary is a role that cannot be avoided. In France, is the notaire. The notary in Italy is the person who, firstly, is independent, does not work for the seller, does not work for the buyer, but his role is to check the paperwork and then register the transfer of ownership from the seller to the buyer. To note that the notary, in terms of costing, varies a lot depending on the property price. The notary can be as a minimum around the 1,000 euros and to no maximum, but generally for property, let's say, that go up to the 2-3 million, a notary can be up to 5,000 euros. To note that if somebody buys as individual, this is the type of fees that I'm referring to. If instead somebody buys as a company, the notary fees tend to be much more higher. One thing that, I forgot to mention when I was talking about the survey, I was so worried to say, don't try to avoid the costing of a survey, that I forgot to talk about how much is a survey. A survey can be around the 400, 500, 600 euros to nothing up to the 2,000 or even sometimes more. The costing doesn't really depend on location. Like a lot of people think if they are in the north, the notary will, the surveyor will be more expensive, and in the south it will be cheaper. That's not the case. Really depends on the type of property, location, yes, but also the area, if it's a tourist area, if it's not. And I always use as an example the region of Piedmont, where we are in the north of Italy. In Piedmont, if we're looking at a survey for maybe a country home in the south of Piedmont, so in the Langhe regions or the Monferrato region, so famous for its Barolo wines, if we think of the landscape, can be about 5,000-6,000 euros top. If we're going on a lake, so Lake Maggiore, still part of Piedmont. For an apartment, you don't spend less than 1,500, 2,000 euros for a survey. So you can see that within the same region, there are a lot of differences. So back to our list, then you have a lawyer. Again, the lawyer is not a mandatory cost in the sense that you have a notary, as I mentioned, that will carry out the registration and technically the due diligence. However, it is to note that the notary usually comes at the very end of a process. So once the contract has already been exchanged between buyer and seller, money has been exchanged, preliminary contract have already been signed. Very often the preliminary contract carried out by the estate agents. So why probably about 60-70% of our clients decided to opt for lawyers is because a lawyer will be able to first represent the buyers only, so represent the interest buyer, not not just the transfer of a property, but also will be able to carry out the due diligence from the very beginning. So once an offer is made, and very often lawyers will draft the offer, the lawyer will be able to work with surveyor, check the documents, check the all the planning history together with the survey, check the ownership in the last 20 years of the property. So if there is any issue that need to be fixed by the seller, that can be put in the preliminary contract, and therefore we ensure that compliance is met by closing. And in the case of the lawyer fees, this really depends on the company that somebody will instruct. Some company have a flat fee depending on the price range. Some using a percentage. We are property organizers offer to our clients a flat fee of 1% with a minimum of 1,500 but a maximum of 5,000 euros. So for a property even of 1 million or 2 million or a property of 500,000, the maximum is going to be 5,000 euros. Taxes. Now, taxes really depends on whether you buy from a building company, so generally a property that is a new build, or from individuals, and in this case we're talking mainly resales. So there is a difference on these two type of properties, but also there is a difference if you decided to buy as resident or as a holiday home. If you decide to buy as resident, and bear in mind that you don't need to be a resident in Italy when you buy that, but you need to declare in front of a notary that you are planning to register residency at the property within 18 months, so a year and a half from closing. So in that case, if you buy from a building company, you will have a 4% VAT on top of the property price. One instead, if you buy as a holiday home, it's going to be a 10% of the property price as a VAT, so as a tax. One instead, if you buy as an individual, the taxes are not calculated on the property price, but on something called cadastral value. And what is the cadastral value? Is generally, well, I explain what is not. The cadastral value is not a commercial price. It's not a commercial value that is given to the building, but it's a value that every property has a unique number, which is multiplied by different coefficient depending on whether you buy a property or you pay the taxes, etc. So the cadastral value is just for tax purposes, and it could be compared if we try to compare to the UK system to the council tax bands. And in this case, for a resale, it would be a 2% of cadastral value if you buy as residence, and therefore you declare in front of the notary that you're registered residency within a year and a half, or 9% if you buy as a holiday home. Another thing that to bear in mind is that when somebody says, I'm planning to register residency, doesn't mean that they have to give up residency in their own country. One can be resident in two different countries. So in total, what somebody should budget as a general idea, if you buy from a building company, budget on top of a property price at 10-15%. One instead, if you buy from an individual, so again, from a resales, budget around the 6 to 9% on top of the property price. Sometimes the 6% get even less because in a paradoxical way, more expensive properties are, much lower is the percentage of the property taxes, and that obviously reduces the total of a costing. I always say, strange, but an apartment of 500,000 might have a cadastral value of 200, 250. And therefore the taxes, the 2 or 9% is going to be on that amount. A property of 200,000 might have a cadastral value of 150,000. So the taxes are very, in terms of percentages and comparison, would be much higher for a lower property than a more expensive one.
Cool. So we've just had a question come from Claudia on this specific topic. She's asking, what is the likely costs and what is the difference if I'm buying a new property or a property still in plant, aka not finished yet? So is there different?
Yes, I mean, it depends again who owns the property and who sells it. So if it's a property that is sold in as a building condition, that's why I think Claudia is mentioning that is not finished, and is a developer that's selling it. In that case, it might be a VAT. If instead is a property that it's in building condition but is sold from a resale, then it would be a property taxes. However, in that case, we also need to see how the property is registered at the land registry office, because when property get built, could be registered already as a residential, and therefore the rule that I just given, the 2 or 9% of the cadastral value will apply. Or they might just be built as they're called F1, which basically means property in the process of being built. And in that case, the 2 or 9% has to be calculated on the property price. So there are obviously certain certain exception that they can be looked into it.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you very much for that. I hope that answers your question.
So the next slide, we are talking about how we're going to finance the property. So are we going to buy in cash, or are we going to decide to go for a mortgage? Okay, firstly, we need to consider that many people think of financing their purchase in Italy via bank in order to diversify their risk. Basically, a mortgage in Italy will not touch, let's say, the credit situation in the UK or your home country, and vice versa. Additionally, people were going for mortgages, and still now, because the interest rate in Italy was very low, and therefore it was an attractive option. Now the interest rates are not so low, as you can see. We're looking at a variable around the 4.6% and a fixed rate for a 4.1%. But what we need to bear in mind here, and I'm going to stress very much the fact that mortgages in Italy are calculated differently than in other countries, different from the UK, different from the US, and even France. So even from countries that are just bordering with Italy. So it is important before starting a search for a property in Italy to check up to how much one can borrow based on the Italian rules. In Italy, we're not looking at the income times 4 or 5 times, whatever one earns, but the banks will check how many mortgages the property owner has already, well, the buyer already has in other countries as well. How many dependents, the type of contract that the person that applies for a mortgage has, the type of work. So there are a lot of things that need to be looked into, and therefore it's important that somebody prepare before making an offer, because if somebody make an offer and then has to apply for a mortgage thinking in England I can get up to X amount, and then in Italy you can get a third of it, then you're going to risk to lose the deposit that you paid unless the property has been, unless the offer has been made conditional to a mortgage. However, still you're going to risk to waste money from the survey, from the lawyers, for agency, etc., because there will be some fees that they're not recoverable. In other things that to consider in Italy, the type of mortgages are quite straightforward, and you have either variable or a fixed. So you can't go for an interest only or a buy to let. And that's why on my next point, I say mortgages in Italy are income based. So what does it mean? That there are no, as I said, different type of mortgages other than variable and fixed. You only have that, and you cannot go for a buy to let. And also, banks do not check how much are you planning to make from that property. So if you're planning to turn into a bed and breakfast, the bank doesn't really care. The bank wants to know how much you're earning today, and then they will calculate your up to how much you're able to afford based on what you're earning today. Another things to consider is that the level of mortgages are different than in your own country. The loan to value goes around the 50 to 60%. And that doesn't mean that is because you are not resident in Italy or you're not Italian. What they're checking is where the income based. So if I'm Italian and I live in England, if I want to buy a property in Italy, they're not going to treat me differently because I'm Italian. Because I'm resident here, my income is in the UK, therefore they will still offer me 50 to 60%. So that is the amount that somebody has to consider, and therefore knowing how much deposit they will be able to afford to put down. Another thing to consider is that in mortgages banks and mortgages need to apply the territoriality rules. What does it mean, territoriality rules? That if you buy in Italy, the property has to be mortgaged by an Italian bank. If you buy in the UK, by a UK bank, and so forth. Therefore, if you're planning to buy in Italy and you have an Italian mortgage, the mortgage, as I said before, will be guaranteed by the property. If you decided to purchase it in your own, to purchase in Italy by using a mortgage in the UK or in the US or in your own country, the property that will have to be mortgaged is the property in your own country. So you basically create some equity from your existing home. What does it mean? And these things is something that, in particular now that the interest rate has raised in the last few months, a lot of people have been doing it, in particular from the US, where the interest rate is still a little bit same level or a bit lower than in Italy. And in this case, when you come to Italy, you become like a cash buyer because you raise your mortgage against your own property. Ryan, unless there are questions on that.
So I know you mentioned about having citizenship and residency, but we just had a question come in. So Brittany has asked, do you have to declare residency if you buy a holiday home? I know you just touched on that, but
no. You don't need to. No, you only declare residency if you're planning to register residency in Italy, cool. And therefore you will have a lower taxation. It's not much about the usage of a property. You can say, I buy the house as a holiday home, but if you're planning to stay more than 3 months, 3-4 months in Italy, you might want to apply as residents because, as I said, you can be residents both in Italy and in your own country. Then obviously there is a question about, where are you taxed? And that is a different type of residency, which is called fiscal residency. And again, I'm available to discuss that if it's needed. But in terms of property taxes for purchasing a property, if you're planning to stay longer than 3 months, it might be worth it to apply for residency, even if you're still living in your own country for more than 6 months.
Perfect. Thank you very much for clearing that up. So yeah, we'll move on to the next slide.
Next slide is more about the after sale and what to consider Again, house insurance, TARI, which is a waste removal taxes, annual property taxes, utilities, all these kind of things should be considered by buyers. Obviously, I'm not here to say how much is going to be an utility, because it really depends on the type of property. But to budget, to know how you're going to carry on in the maintenance of a property. House insurance in Italy is not obligatory, but I think I don't have to say it. We recommend to have it, in particular if somebody decided to rent it to third parties. Annual property taxes are carried out, are payable twice, in June and December. It's called IMU, and that is one thing that local authority do not provide. There are very few local authorities in the whole Italy that do provide it, is the calculation. So resident or homeowners have to calculate the property taxes by themselves, and or instruct an accountant to do it. This is, for example, something that we do annually for most of our clients, that they ask us for this service, because every year can change, and you need to liaise with the local authority, find out the calculation, and do it. TARI is a waste removal tax, and again, is obligatory. But the local authority here will send you the bill, and is based on the number of people in the household, the square meters, and again, the cadastral information, the cadastral value of the property. And the next, we're talking about what to consider if we buy a property. The next slide. If we buy a property and need to be renovated or probably built. And we can go back to the question of, I think it was Claudia, what checks to be carried out before buying? If a property needs to be renovated, a lot of people think, oh, I don't need a survey, I don't need a survey, I don't need anything, because I know the property needs to be built. Again, still recommended to carry out a survey, because you want to know the history, the planning history of a property. And if there are something that the seller has done that should be fixed by him, it need to be fixed before you do the renovation. Otherwise, your renovation might stop, might not even start, and therefore why inherit problems if they are seller's responsibility. Same things. What if you buy a plot of land? If you buy a plot of land, you might think, I don't need a survey. Well, a survey will be able to confirm up to how much you're able to build. And also, can you build on that plot of land? If an agent says that you can build a 200 square meters villa, fine, fair enough. Carry out a survey, making an offer conditional to a survey, so we can actually check that the 200 square meters are not 100 square meters underground and then 100 square meters above, or that they are actually 200 square meters of property, because sometimes it might be that the property had the planning permission in the past, and at that time one could build. Years that pass by, and the property cannot be built anymore. And then you're going to find yourself with just a beautiful plot of land with maybe some olive trees, but not able to build. So survey is very important. It is also important to know the cost for a renovation and what kind of building you're planning to go for. If, for example, you're planning to have a smaller renovation works, you need to check, obviously, what need to be done on every property. But very much is about the cost to budget when you are making, when you're searching for a property. What we tend to do, for example, is to ask our clients when they say we want a restoration project, not about how much is the property that they're planning to buy, what they want to spend, but we asking, okay, this is fine, but let us know the total budget, because a property of 100,000, if you have somebody a 50,000 budget for the renovation, might need 300,000 renovation. So it's pointless in looking at this type of properties. At the same time, a property of 50,000 might have 100,000 work and be able then to stay within budget. So it's always very important to try to understand the cost for renovation. And again, I'm not here to tell you what is the cost for renovation, because it really depends in that case. A little bit like the survey. If you're in the north, if you're in the south, in what part of Italy, the type of property, is a townhouse, it's a plot of land, but just to give you an idea, if we have a plot of land, the prices can be don't know, in the region of Puglia, something like 1,100, 1,200 euros per square meter to start, to 4,000 euro per square meters. I don't know, if you're building a brand new villa in on the lake area. Also depends on the type of grounds. So all these kind of things that need to be checked in advance and be prepared. Finally, professional required. Consider that, because it's not just the building that has an impact on your budget to buy a property in Italy. So you will need some professionals. Professional that could be a surveyor, can be an architect, can be an engineer, but also, if you have, for example, a property that needs to have a roof redone, you might think, oh, I can go for a geometer, so a surveyor, which would be the lowest in terms of costing. But then you need to include also a engineer for the structural calculations, and that obviously those are different fees. Or you might need, if you're planning to buy a plot of land to build a villa or to build a swimming pool anywhere, you need to have a geologist that does an analysis of the ground. So there are some fees that need to be considered, and if you therefore you need to think when you need to include all these professionals within your kind of planning, and it can have an impact on the total of how much you're planning to spend to buy a property in Italy. Final things, a little bit just, I said it before, just a little bit about us. We are a company that I founded in 2006. Before it was just me. And luckily now, almost 20 years later, we are a team of over 20 people. We cover all Italy, and we are registered as a international property professional. We have professional indemnity, and we offer various services. As I mentioned, we do property finding, which that is how we were born, and that is still our core service. So we are one point of contact for our clients. We search all properties that could be available on the market. We don't charge any extra fees because, as I said, we share fees with the local agents when the agents are involved. So in that case, we represent only the buyers, and the estate agents will represent the sellers. So we never want to duplicate the fees for our clients.
Stefan, just quickly as well, we're running short on time. We've got a lot of questions to cover. So
so they can read any question, and we can go ahead with the questions if you prefer.
Yeah, that would be great if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem.
We can go 10 minutes over.
Yeah, sure.
So Amanda has just asked, is it essential to open an Italian bank account to buy a property in Italy?
It's not essential. Makes your life easier in the sense that Italian bank account will help you to pay the utility bills. This one can be paid also by card, but in some local authority, for example, there are some bills that can only be paid by an Italian bank, not from international accounts. But also, as I mentioned before, the IMU, which is the annual property taxes, is paid by a document that is called F24, which is only a document available through Italian banks, and it's just a boring things that you need to fill in within the bank, and is an automatic payment. So make life easier, because otherwise you will always have to be physically at a bank or at a post office to pay these bills, or having somebody else to pay on your behalf.
Okay, thank you very much for clearing that up. So yeah, if we can throw it back to the taxes and likely cost slides, I think Mark asked a question where are these numbers different for citizens versus non-citizens?
No. As I said, the 6 to 9% on top of property price for resales property do not change whether you are Italian citizen or non-Italian citizen. What changes is whether, so you go on the lower level, if you register residency within 18 months, and to register residency, you don't have to be Italian. You can be any nationality. Obviously, you need to have there are some criteria for registered residency. But if you're planning to be in Italy for, as I said, more than 3 months, it's worth it to consider it.
Okay, perfect. I hope that cleared that up for Mark. So on the same slide, James has also asked about a question about the estate agency fees and asking that about if they're negotiable.
Very often, yeah, it's unlikely. I would say when we work with agencies, we obviously, when we work with agency, we put very clear that we share the fees and none of our fees are are not going to be raised, because very often what you have is some agency charge the 4 and 5%, and therefore if we come in through and we charge a 3.5, they try to get the extra 1 or 1.5% on top of it. So obviously with us, we are adamant that is our fees, and then they get paid only by the sellers, and that's it. But they're not, agency don't tend to negotiate their fees unless they're paid kind of cash in hand. But we don't recommend that again, because you're not protected.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So James has followed up as well with another question. If I register my property for permanent residency, can I live in it indefinitely, or do I have a limit on the time I can spend in Italy per year?
No, you can stay as much as you like. Obviously, depending on the nationality of the person that is resident, we need to apply for residency. And if you are known, if you're in a country like in the US and the UK now, it means that you will need to apply for a visa to be in Italy first in order to apply for the elective for the residency after. But you can stay as much as you like. One thing that we always chat with our clients is about their situation in terms of working situation, because if somebody lives in Italy for more than 6 months and they're still working, so therefore they have an income in their own country, the moment that they stay longer than 6 months in Italy, they become fiscally resident in Italy as well, and therefore they will have to pay income taxes in Italy rather than in their own country. So there is this kind of things as well that need to be considered, and we have very lengthy conversation with our clients depending on their circumstances to see what is best for them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for clearing that up. So we've got a few more questions we can answer before we close off the presentation. So Rosie has asked, are there any tax benefits of buying an off-plan home in Italy?
No, in terms of taxations. What is, the plus of buying something that is brand new is that you can personalize it. And when you buy something that is a new build, you also have 10 years guarantees on the building works. So obviously when you buy a resale, there might be some maintenance work for future or in the near future, or even when straight away you buy it. But with a new build, there should be no surprise that you should be able to buy it. And as I said, having a 10 years guarantee from the builder. So if anything happens, you can have it fixed for free, unless obviously it's a tear and wear.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for that. So Patrick is asking a question on the survey, which you mentioned in that slide as well. So can I ask if the survey of the property is undertaken before the offer deposit is paid, or does this occur after? If the latter, the deposit will not be lost if the survey leads to the buyer withdrawing the offer.
It really depends on how the offer contract is drawn. We always recommend to make the offer conditional to survey, but also to make to carry out the surveys after the offer is agreed. Otherwise, you might risk that you instruct a surveyor, the property is still on the market, somebody else come and steal it from you, and you spend the money for a survey. Also, some sellers might not allow the surveyor to access the property, or in Italy you need to have the authorization of the seller of authorization of a owner to go to the local authority and get all the documents that are registered at the land registry and at the local authority's office in the planning department. So if you don't have an offer agreed, you might just carry out work for no reason and wasting money. So ideally, you need to make an offer conditional to due diligence and the survey, and made it clear that if there are any issues, you have a right to issues that cannot be dealt with or cannot be resolved, that you are the right to withdraw from the transaction and get your money back. Again, it's really important to know what you're signing. Unfortunately, a lot of agents in Italy use pre-made forms that don't have this kind of way of changing the conditions. And again, here it's even better to have, it's even more recommended to have a lawyer that represent if an agent just insisted to sign a document that cannot be made a conditional to the various things.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. So yeah, just be wary of what you're signing these days before you jump into anything.
Yeah.
In
particular, if it's not in Italian and you don't speak Italian.
Yeah, exactly. Anis has asked, I know you mentioned about the benefits of having residency in Italy. So she's asked, you said you can have residency in 2 countries, but what are the benefits of specifically having residency in Italy?
Well, really depends on what you're looking for. Italy is still number 2 on the health from the health point of view. So in terms of organizational point of view, Italy is the countries that has the best support. First is France, the second is Italy. So you have the kind of like a national health for free. You're able to buy a car because without being resident, you won't be able to have a car. So you will always have to rent a car or bring a car from your own country. Utility bills are cheaper than if you have if the property is registered as a holiday home. So yes, there are some benefit in being fully resident, in particular if you're planning to be several months or maybe even full time in Italy. The only thing, as I said, need to be considered that the moment you are in Italy for 6 months plus 1 day, that basically means that you're not just electively resident in Italy, but you're also fiscally resident in Italy, and therefore there are some not just benefit but also taxes that need to be paid on the income, which you would pay in your own country if instead you live in your own country for more than 6 months and a day.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you very much. That's kind of all we have time for today's session. So I thank you very much, Stefania, for your insightful tips and advice. We strongly recommend you obviously get in touch with the property organizer directly to discuss your requirements in detail. We'll be in touch with their details shortly. So yeah, thank you very much again, Stefania.
Thank you for having me
with us today, and thank you for our listeners for joining. Before we finish, we'd like you to drop us a review on Trustpilot if you found this webinar helpful. So yeah, thank you very much for your engagement today, and we'll catch you at the next webinar. So thank you. See you later, Stefania.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.